All right. We're ready to go. Get
I love
pumped
that
up.
song.
Yep. Well, I figure we all like rock and metal, so good intro for us. All right. So if anyone's new and has never tuned in, we are three nerdy carnivore chicks, and we are loving science and loving to study, and we're going through this textbook. And it is called Ketogenic: The Science of Therapeutic Carbohydrate Restriction in Human Health. And this is not a book club. This is a study club. We do not read ahead, and we read and take turns reading and discussing as we go. So we're still in chapter 1, and there's a total of 10 chapters of this textbook, and they're so full of information. It's been really, really interesting and really fun.
We're going to be doing this study club until 2027, guys. So
until we're all old and gray and so awesome. Okay. So we left off last week at the bottom of page 45, and we're kind of going into talking about the 6 diet goals that were proposed for the dietary goals for Americans that were proposed by the USDA and the McGovern Commission. So we went over goal number 1 last week, which was increase carbohydrate consumption. They wanted us to ramp up the carbs to account for approximately 55 to 60% of total caloric intake. And it caused a problem because they were reducing dietary fat with more carbohydrates, and which don't satiate. They drive hunger. We eat more. We get fatter, which we have seen over the years. So, all right. So we are picking up in the next section.
Sugar. I dropped my book.
You dropped that. Don't do that. Yeah. So, and I do think I have the table. Let's see when we have a table that's going to be introduced. Oh, in the next section. So let me go ahead and get my little presentation pulled up here so I can make sure I have it. Let's see. Table 1.6, 1.8. Okay, it's going to be that one. All right, Kim, you wanna do the pick up where we left off and start reading this section? I'll leave the table up because it's going to be mentioned in this section.
So I read the last time, didn't I?
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, Karen, if you want to start, you can start.
Where did we end off exactly? Do you remember?
1.3.9.1.1. At the end of page 45.
Okay, so I was thinking I read that, did I not? Oh, well, it didn't matter. Okay.
Yeah,
so who's going to
read? Okay.
If you want to start, you can. Carrie? Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. 1.3.9.1.1. Biological reality number 1. Humans have no essential requirement for carbohydrate. That includes fiber.
Yes.
There are essential proteins and fats that humans cannot synthesize, but no essential carbohydrates. The human brain has an essential requirement for carbohydrate of between 25 and 100 grams per day, but the human liver can produce more than enough glucose to cover the brain's glucose requirement without any need for ingested carbohydrate. Table 1.7 extends this argument by showing the functions of the 3 dietary macronutrients: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Note that carbohydrates have only one function, which is to act as an energy source. Carbohydrates cannot build muscles, bones, brain, liver, or heart. And so then, of course, beneath the table 1.7, it says an obvious consequence of basing a diet on a macronutrient that serves only one function in the human body is that this carbohydrate-heavy diet will be deficient in key nutrients: which will produce negative health consequences. We can,
Wow, this is an interesting table. Like,
yep.
if they, yeah, like if I would think if doctors were taught this, if we were taught this, it would really, to me, it would really solidify that we should be eating little to no carbohydrates. So, okay, so the table, the very last column, the column on the left is for carbohydrates, and it tells what the biological function of it is. So it lists only one. It's a source of energy as glucose. And then the middle column, it's saying versus protein and versus fat. So versus protein is the middle column. So protein has a lot more function. It's a source of energy as glucose and amino acids. It synthesizes enzymes and antibodies, maintains acid-base balance. It's responsible for repair and maintenance of tissues, for example, hair, skin, eyes, muscles, organs, hormone production, transport of molecules as hemoglobin, and the messenger transmits signals to coordinate biological processes. So protein does a lot. And then fat has about an equal number of functions. It's a source of energy as both glutones, ketones, and free fatty acids. It helps with vitamin absorption, particularly vitamins A, D, E, and K. I have to wonder with people who don't eat much fat, like they're missing the fat. They must be getting deficient because there's some vitamins that are fat soluble. So they need to be taken or eaten, consumed in the presence of dietary fat. So maybe this is why people who are on a super low diet really do need to supplement.
And maybe that's why, so many people are so low on vitamin D too,
That's
possibly
true.
D especially,
Yeah. Well, I mean, we tend to think of vitamin D as mostly like we get it from the sun, but if we, if we're trying to get some from our diets or people are supplementing, like I live in the Pacific Northwest, and so people are notoriously vitamin D deficient up here.
I mean, most people aren't outside long enough to even get it from the sun these days,
Yeah. And the sun is not as, strong up here, and there's a little more cloud cover. And so we, up here, we're always told, make sure you take your vitamin D supplement. But if people are on a low fat diet, it's not absorbing very well.
Yeah.
Unless you take it with fat. So fat also, it serves as a structural material for cell tissues and cell membrane. It helps in hormone production. It's chemical messengers between the cells, prostaglandin formation, which has a role in inflammation, pain, fever, and blood clotting. It preserves the integrity of the blood-brain barrier in the form of the omega-3s, and it provides insulation. So that's a pretty interesting list of benefits from protein and fat versus carbohydrates. And honestly, the only thing that carbohydrate does, protein and fat also do.
Yeah.
And then I think it's also important to explain that the word essential doesn't just mean how we are accustomed to it meaning, like essential. When we hear that, it actually has a meaning in medicine, and that means that it's something that we cannot synthesize inside of our body. So the reason why carbohydrates aren't essential is not because we don't need sugar. It's because our body can literally make the sugar that we need out of whatever we feed it, So
that's an excellent point to make.
And it'll make the amount that you need. You won't have excess. I mean, there might be some rare, strange medical conditions with hormonal issues or something. But I mean, just in general, if you're eating, protein and a lot of good fat, good fatty meat, you're going to get, your liver is going to make that glucose that you need, and it'll make what you need, and you're not going to have too much to where it spikes up your insulin or anything like that. It'll regulate itself in a like I said, in normal circle, I'm sure somebody could comment and say, well, not with. So just want to say there
But
might be some exceptions, but
but for the vast majority of people who have an appropriately functioning liver, and it's doing its job, it'll make the glucose that you need. And so it's interesting because not having eaten any carbs now it's been over 15 months. I feel better without eating carbs. So, and it's probably because I was eating fewer of these other two food categories before. I mean, there were lots of times where before I became carnivore, I really didn't eat a whole lot of meat. And I didn't eat very much dietary fat at all. So I had like a low protein, low fat, high carbohydrate diet. And I felt horrible all the time. And when I look at this table, I'm going, okay, well, it kind of explains all of these functions. I wasn't feeding my body the nutrients that it needed in order to perform these functions well.
And it really explains why there are a lot of health conditions where people, just because they aren't getting the nutrients that they need, and they lose their hair, for example, or their skin has problems. I mean, or any number of things, hormonal issues, because they're not getting the appropriate protein and fat, and because largely because we've just been told we need to eat all these carbohydrates and that's healthy, and they pay attention to the LDL cholesterol, and you can look terrible, but you've got great LDL, and you feel terrible, but your LDL is awesome. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Interesting. I'll pull that down for now.
Okay.
All right. Okay. I'll take, Kim, you want to take the next section?
You go ahead.
Okay. So we'll go in reverse order. Okay. So the next section is 1.3.9.1.2. So biological reality number 2. And the second chart is up in this section. So I'll put that chart up. We got lots of charts over the next handful of pages. Okay, the second biological reality number 2, carbohydrates do not satiate, they drive hunger. So the second biological reality that McGovern's committee overlooked is that carbohydrates do not satiate. Rather, one of the causes of failure is that the conventional low-calorie diets restricted in both fat and carbohydrate usually lead to hunger, which the patient is unable or unwilling to tolerate. This is especially true for a sugar-rich, ultra-processed food diet, for which the low-carbohydrate ketogenic diet may be helpful in alleviating symptoms. Already in 1960, Yudkin and Carey wrote, "It would seem from this that carbohydrate does not satisfy the appetite. It may even increase it because more dietary carbohydrate may lead to more dietary fat." Okay, well, that's not a bad thing, but they didn't know. This conclusion is supported by the observation that the addition of glucose to a reducing diet led to a decreased loss of weight. Thus, this could not be accounted for by the calories from the glucose and suggests that the glucose stimulated the appetite. As a result, the natural tendency for people eating diets high in sugar and other addictive foodstuffs is to eat more calories, what has been termed carbohydrate-induced hyperphagia. This is precisely what seems to have happened in the United States after 1977, and this is where it points to Figure 1.9. So this says Figure 1.9 shows that after 1976 to 1980, both U.S. men and women increased their energy intake from carbohydrates while reducing their intakes of total and saturated fats. The result, total energy intake increased by 6.8% in men and 21.7% in women. This increase is more than sufficient to explain the dramatic increase in obesity and subsequent type 2 diabetes rates in U.S. men and women beginning after 1980. Okay, so the left-hand side is men, and the right-hand side is women. So according to the diagram here, so the key, the blue part is intake. Total intake, I guess. Does that make sense, you guys? And then the red is carbohydrates, the orange is fat, and the yellow is saturated fat. So not sure exactly what all it's trying to say here. Do you guys know how to interpret this?
So this is from the NHANES study, right?
Yeah, the NHANES study. So on the very left, it says energy / intake in kilocalories. So the intake increased in both men and women. I don't
really know what we're looking at.
I don't understand why. I know the blue part says intake, but
okay, are those years at the bottom, I guess?
Those are years. Yeah,
okay.
It looks
so
like those are years.
So basically it looks like the energy intake in men from 1971 to 1974 was just above 1,000 calories, right? Or I'm sorry, I'm really confused.
This is a confusing.
Total,
this is confusing.
2,500. It looks like.
Yeah, and then it kind of stayed there, and then it went up.
And then it went up
to about, well, a little bit less than 3,000 is what it looks like, and then it kind of went down again, like maybe 2,700, and then maybe like 2,600.
Maybe if I read the next section, we'll know what it's talking about.
Yeah, because I'm still kind of confused as to what the blue part is signifying. I understand the elements like carbohydrates, fat, and saturated fat. But
yeah,
it's just what the
a really confusing chart. Means. Yeah. This is a really confusing chart, and there's a whole bunch of little numbers up there too that I don't know. Okay, let's see. CHO. Yeah, carbohydrates, fat, protein ratios. Is that what this is showing? Is that the ratio? It has 3 numbers. I don't know. Let's keep reading and see if it'll start making.
I was going to say maybe they'll refer to the chart in the reading somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 1.3.9.1.3, biological reality number 3, high carbohydrate diets produce a cataclysmic metabolic storm in those with insulin resistance. The final biological reality, of which McGovern's committee was understandably unaware, was perhaps predictable since it was only just beginning to be studied. It is that high carbohydrate, low-fat diets produce a cataclysmic metabolic storm in those with insulin resistance. See also section 1.2, insulin resistance, a unifying feature of chronic disease. Unfortunately, in 1977, the condition of insulin resistance and its relationship to dietary carbohydrate excess was only just beginning to be studied. Even the man considered the father of insulin resistance and of the metabolic syndrome, Professor Gerald Reaven, MD of Stanford University School of Medicine, who had begun also to identify the curative effects of carbohydrate restricted diets in those with his syndrome, eventually capitulated to a growing academic pressure to demonize fats and ignore any possible role for carbohydrates in the causation of CHD. What does that mean?
Coronary heart disease.
Coronary heart disease. That's so funny. That's not something we use in the medical field.
I know.
I mean, I guess it might be for some people, but I've never used it. So after publishing those studies showing the benefits of a degree of carbohydrate restriction as low as 17% of calories, Revan inexplicably changed course. Instead of continuing to study truly low carbohydrate diets of 5% to 10% of calories, he reversed direction and began to promote a hybrid low fat, high carbohydrate diet that sort of addressed the insulin resistance problem while sort of keeping so called bad LDL cholesterol, blood cholesterol concentrations low. It seems he never could quite accept the obvious and powerful message of his own research findings. It's possible that Revan may have wished to avoid the fate of British professor John Yudkin, who, besides his novel studies of the low carbohydrate diet for management of obesity, was amongst the first to warn of the dangers of sucrose, sugar. Instead, Revan began to distrust his own findings, specifically that he had discovered an ultimate truth that insulin resistance, not elevated LDL cholesterol concentration, is driving coronary heart disease and other chronic diseases. Instead, it seems that near the end of his career, he chose to ignore all the evidence he had painstakingly collected over 4 decades of meticulous research. In one study, Revan's group followed a larger group of about 600 apparently healthy individuals over 5 or more years to determine whether hyperinsulinemia could predict coronary heart disease risk. In a second study shown in Figure 1.11, Revan and colleagues measured the level of insulin resistance in 208 initially healthy Californians whose health was followed over the next 4 to 11 years. To measure their levels of insulin resistance, researchers subjected study participants to the most specific and intensive testing ever devised, requiring constant infusion of glucose, insulin, and somatostatin. Note also, hypertension was the most common disease, followed by cancer, coronary heart disease, and type 2 diabetes in about equal numbers, with stroke being the least common. Clearly, for those with insulin resistance, future risk is not confined to heart attack or cancer. Another reason to take it seriously. Note also the strong relationship between hypertension and insulin resistance. See also section 1.2, insulin resistance, a unifying feature of chronic disease.
Okay, so they actually mentioned two of the diagrams here in this
But not
section.
the one we were wanting it to mention.
But not the one we were wanting. I'm just gonna chalk that one aside, put that one aside as I don't understand it.
Same.
I see where it's referred to though. It was in the carbohydrates do not satiate, they drive hunger section. But we can talk about it.
Yeah, that's the one I read, and it still didn't help.
Yeah. I don't know.
Maybe one of these things you go back and all of a sudden the light bulb turns on.
The only
thing
I can think of is that it's showing that when you eat a higher percentage of carbohydrates, which is the
Red.
the red one, when you increase that, the amount, which is in blue, overall that you eat increases.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I
That's
can.
kind of what I was getting from it.
Yeah.
That may be the point of it, is that it drives hunger, because that's what they were saying, is it doesn't satiate, it drives hunger. I think you're right, Carrie.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because they let me go back to it. So the first couple of time frames, the intake was pretty steady. It was flat on all the colors, and then looks like the fats still remained flat throughout all 4 time frames for both men and women. The only thing that actually increased was the red part, which was the carbohydrates.
I wish my fats would remain flat.
Oh, funny. Yeah, so I think you're right. So their fat intake remains steady over the whole period of time. The only thing that increased was their carbohydrate intake, which was the red, and that drove hunger, and their overall intake increased.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right. That is a
Yeah.
really not easy diagram.
But it almost look at like directly correlates, That's
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
I
Although,
think if they hadn't filled it in, because I was taking it as a whole rather than as different data points. I was thinking of the data points as stacking on top of each other, not as each as an individual point with
me too.
the blue. Actually, like the blue is just showing how much, and then the little red dots are just showing how much of the red, and it seemed to me like all of it should have been a percentage of a whole, but that's not what it's, but that's not what it's demonstrating.
Well, but I mean, to me, it shows like every color up to the blue.
Yeah.
2,500 calories, right? The blue should have been the whole thing, though. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's kind of hard to read.
But I think we figured it out.
I think so, too. I think you got it, Carrie.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I think that, yeah, I'm happy with that explanation.
Okay, so go back to the other one. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Somebody keeps messaging. So if y'all hear vibrating.
Okay. So the explanation of this one says the percentage of apparently healthy individuals who developed coronary heart disease over approximately 5 years. So the left panel, which is in red, is the percentage of apparently healthy individuals who develop coronary heart disease over approximately 5 years, ranked according to quartile of blood insulin concentration achieved during a glucose tolerance test, showing that coronary heart disease risk rose progressively with increasing degrees of hyperinsulinemia. Okay. So, all right. So this axis says the coronary heart disease percentage, and then I guess this is, but it goes up as they are given, I guess, more glucose during
love your graphs. I'm just going to be honest.
I'm not liking their graphs either. Okay, so let's see if the right panel makes sense. So the right panel is the percentage of the same subjects in 3 tertiles of insulin resistance measured with the insulin suppression test who developed evidence of coronary heart disease. So predictably, testing of blood cholesterol concentrations would never have shown this clear distinction between those at low and high risk for future development of coronary heart disease. So what, I guess the more insulin resistant they are, the more likely they're going to get coronary heart disease. Is that what it's showing?
That's how I interpret it.
Yeah. I'd redo these graphs if I was rewriting this book.
I think you should redo them, Lynn.
I'd have to understand.
They should have consulted you on this because you're our graph girl.
That's right. You are a graph guru.
I'm the math nut.
Yeah. I mean, if the graph guru can't figure it out, like, guys, we need to redo these.
And what hope do we have of interpreting studies if, I mean, really?
My brain's also not really that good today because I just got back from a 4-day trip.
Oh, yeah.
And so Tuesday was our 34th wedding anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. So we took off on Sunday and went to an island here on the Puget Sound called Fox Island.
Ooh.
And it was cool because we were set to stay for 2 nights, and it was a beautiful Airbnb, like gorgeous, right there on the water. And like like this house, it was like an apartment over these people's garage, but the house is like almost 7,000 square feet. Like it is amazing.
Wow.
And like beautiful heated pool. We had our own private hot tub, gorgeous views of Mount Rainier and the water and the boats. It was really beautiful.
Oh, wow. That sounds like fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we got to explore the island. Thanks, Mike. Glad Orca. No, it didn't
Glad
seem
the
to
orca
work. We heard some seals. So I'll go back and take a look. So Pete, I says, I appreciate you being out there because goodness knows it's risky and sketchy and dicey. Yes, it is. That's for sure. What's up? All right. Hey.
Hey, what's up?
Kim now live in her van by the river.
I do. It's a suburban though, so we're taking it up a notch from the old van.
Yeah, it's good for a family of 6, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You won't get cold in the winter.
Well, we're probably going to have to switch the time anyway, guys. So we'll have to report back to you guys about that. But
yeah, we're going to have to figure it out because I'm the site administrator for the Healing Humanity, the new membership site, and Carrie and Adam, they have scheduled a weekly Zoom call at 2:00 my time, Pacific time, every Thursday, and we start at 2:30 my time. So we'll work something out.
Well, we can always just totally switch the day too. I mean, we'll talk about it, and then we'll let everybody
we'll talk
know
about it. Yeah, and that's another reason why I didn't get the stream, the link posted for the stream till like I got home. I totally zoned, but
I don't need the link till I'm ready to log on anyway. So
my brain is still on island time, and just it's cool because we have so many islands here in the Puget Sound, and the island, it's like you get onto an island, it's just a totally different pace.
Yeah,
it's so chill. There's something about island people.
That's what I want to be. So chill.
Me too.
Chill. Yeah, we love it.
Oh, I forgot to tell you guys real quick while we're talking about like other stuff. My schedule at work is probably going to change drastically. We have a new scheduling system, and where I'm not going to be charge nurse anymore. I'm basically just in with everybody else. So I don't even know what my schedule is going to be. I may be working some 11A to 11Ps. So yeah, it's just kind of up in the air right now, but
so we'll just be flexible.
Yep, that's right. We'll work it out.
Yeah.
We'll try to make sure we post the next week's session a lot earlier, and so people can plan. So, okay, so let's see if this one makes a little bit more sense. So, because this was also referred to in the section that you just read. So it says number of clinical events observed over 4 to 11 years as a function of insulin resistance at baseline. So it looks like the bottom part where it says the -4 or less than 4.4, and then 4.4 to 7.8, and then greater than 7.8, says that's steady state plasma glucose concentration in millimoles per liter during a constant infusion of somatostatin, glucose, and insulin. So they're looking at during this infusion, what did their plasma glucose do in response? I'm assuming this is somehow an indicator of how insulin resistant they were.
Well, this is not really that clear because we're in America and we don't go by that.
Yeah,
that's true.
Maybe it's clear somewhere else. But it says in 200.
Yeah, if it's clear somewhere else, you guys let us know.
Let us know. Yes. So it says the 208 subjects in the study were divided into 3 tertiles on the basis of their steady state plasma glucose concentration infusions. Oh, so this is how much glucose they were getting infused. Does that sound right?
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
So the more glucose, basically.
It's based. So it's based on how much they were getting infused. So it says based on the basis of their steady state plasma glucose concentration infusions, during the laboratory experiment. They were followed for between 4 and 11 years to determine who developed any of the 5 listed chronic diseases. The number of clinical events experienced increased dramatically in those with mild to severe insulin resistance. So I'm confused then. Was it the infusion or was it their reaction to the infusion? I don't know. Based on this, it's confusing. But the bottom line is that it looks like the group with the tall column are those who are the most insulin resistant, and they are the ones that developed the most variety of diseases over the study period. Again, not the greatest explanation for the graph. The graph is probably
okay. So I pulled up a little graph. 4.4 millimoles is equivalent to 80 milligrams per deciliter, which would be what we would measure in. So, and then it says 4.7 would be 85, and 7.8. Hang on, sorry, I'm having to look at a table, but I don't think it gives 7.8 on here. 6.8 is one. Oh yeah, here it does. 7.8 is equivalent to 140. So basically the far right column would be greater than 140.
So their blood sugar.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
okay.
So basically it's what we already know. The lower you keep your blood sugar, the less health problems you're going to have. I mean,
right.
I mean,
look at the less
community know that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so I mean, look at the far left column. It's like
crazy.
A tiny little itty bitty smidgen of blue, which is hypertension, and that's it. None of these other illnesses. So the blue is hypertension, the orange is cancer, and the dark blue is coronary heart disease. So the middle column had a little bit of coronary heart disease.
And Lynn, this is interesting too. Like thinking back about my CGM readings and my hemoglobin A1C, and you know how I was telling you I didn't think that was accurate. Well, I was never above 140. I mean, like maybe 1 or 2 spikes in, a couple week period if I were to put some of that stuff in my coffee that I shouldn't have been putting in there. But this just goes to show that like these people aren't getting diabetes if they're below 140 on the regular. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And it's taken, you would have to be staying at or above 140.
Yeah.
To see
diabetes. So mine asked, were they being infused or just followed for 11 years? It sounds like they were being infused.
Yeah, it's an infusion. It sounds like it says steady state plasma glucose concentration during constant infusion of somatostatin, glucose, and insulin. What is somatostatin? I can't remember.
I don't remember either. I mean, is it a statin medication?
It is a cyclic peptide well known for strong regulatory effects throughout the body, also known by the name of growth hormone inhibiting hormone. So it's a growth hormone inhibitor. It function to prevent the production of other hormones in your endocrine system and certain secretions in your endocrine system. I don't really understand why they were given that. Maybe just to keep, the other hormones from interfering or something. I don't know.
Maybe that's what I was wondering is why are they giving that? But maybe so they don't get interference with other hormones.
Yeah, because you know how like all these different hormones come into play. I don't know. It's just a guess.
Mike says that's not ethical. They are killing people for science. Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this was how many years ago? This is wasn't this referring back to the studies like back in like 1960 or something like that?
Yeah, when did they say this study was done?
because there wasn't it Reven who was doing these, and
Reven and colleagues. Yeah.
yeah, and so he was disregarding much of his own work to kind of move into the higher carb theory or way, because he was afraid he would meet Yudkin's fate, or that's speculated, but that's probably
Well,
true.
they were under a lot of pressure, peer pressure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, interesting.
So I think this was done like in the 60s. So I think there was a little more. I mean, if people volunteered, they would just do it. I mean, now I'm not so sure that would fly.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Carrie, you want to grab the next section here?
All right. The next section being 1.3.9.1.4. How hyperinsulinemia produces the visceral obesity that is the key to the pathology of the insulin resistance syndrome. High carbohydrate diets produce persistently abnormal elevations in blood insulin concentrations, hyperinsulinemia, in those with insulin resistance. Persistent hyperinsulinemia in turn partitions ingested fat and excess carbohydrate into subcutaneous and visceral fat stores. Included in visceral fat is fat accumulated ectopically, where it doesn't belong, in muscles, the pancreas, and the liver, the latter causing non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Some people believe that once ectopic fat content of the liver and pancreas exceeds an individual's personal fat threshold, type 2 diabetes becomes inevitable. So then it talks about figure 1.2 illustrating the process is currently understood. And boy, there's a lot of arrows and.
Oh, okay, let me pull that one up. That's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot going on there.
Oh, gee, that's a big old one.
I don't even know where to begin. Like,
maybe we should just keep reading.
I think so too, because this is crazy.
Yeah. So the key
take a screen, guys.
Look at it while we're reading.
Take a screenshot screenshot and then come back and refer to this because
and zoom in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's going to talk about that cycle, but I think it's better to maybe do it through the
reading
flow of the reading rather than trying to interpret.
I agree. Oh, yeah. And you know what? Before we Mike says, when's the test? I'll cram right the night before. That's a good thing we're not being tested on this. I almost forgot, and this is kind of a little off subject, but it's for last, because Kim mentioned your CGM. Mm-hmm. I wanted to tell you, I know you guys are you're part of the Healing Humanity Life member site. Get on there. Dr. Nelson posted a discussion in the diabetes group that you might be interested in.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
It has to do with why your hemoglobin A1C can go up when you're on the carnivore or really low carb diet. And there's been some back and forth with the discussion. So it might be something that you can look at, and maybe you can even ask him some questions.
Okay. Okay, sweet.
Awesome. We'll check it out. We love Dr. Nelson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to tell you when you brought it up, and then my brain it left.
Lynn, you've got a lot of responsibilities, lady.
Yeah. You sure do.
My brain is so full right now.
Well, I'm glad
they do a core dump.
I'm glad they've got you on this Healing Humanities documentary. Healing Humanity, not humanities.
No, humanities.
I'm glad they've got you because I think you're probably really good.
Oh, well, thanks a lot. Okay. All right, carry on.
All right, so figure 1.12 illustrates the process as currently understood. The key driver of this ectopic fat accumulation, especially in the liver, is increasing insulin resistance in an expanding mass of adipose tissue cells. But once these fat cells become insulin resistant, free fatty acids, FFA, accumulate in the bloodstream, ready to be deposited as ectopic fat in skeletal muscles, the pancreas, and in the liver. Ectopic fat accumulation in skeletal muscles impairs their ability to serve as a reservoir for any diet-induced increase in blood glucose concentrations. As a result, blood glucose concentrations remain elevated after eating, stimulating further insulin sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
So I was thinking
Yeah,
that
IS, that's probably insulin sensitivity.
yeah.
So that's number 6 on the it's
Mhm.
interesting. I'm looking and I'm kind of following along the diagram as you're reading.
Yeah.
And it is kind of explaining as you follow along. So this says it's number 6 in the figure is where we're at. Yeah.
Yep.
It like number 5 was the muscle. It shows the muscle tissue. So if it's full of fat, it can't properly
I would think that would
utilize
be
it.
insulin resistance.
Me
not
too.
insulin
That's why I
sensitivity.
was wondering if it stood for something else, because it'd make you more resistant if you couldn't, because it was saying that ectopic fat accumulation in skeletal muscles impairs their ability to serve as a reservoir. So since it's impairing
So
the
they're
ability,
crammed full. Like think
yeah.
about we're thinking about like
Yeah.
the cargo, or the train model where I've seen I've heard so many times where they're, the insulin's packing it in, and it's packed it into to the muscles. It's unless you're actively using some of it, there's no, it's making some extra fat in there. So you've stored fat everywhere, and it's can't pack it anywhere else.
Yeah,
So
so
I would
I'm
think that
wondering
would
if that's a typo, because that doesn't make
I think
sense.
It might
so.
be. I
That
think
would
it
have to
is
lead to
because
more insulin resistance, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
you would think so. Either that or we're using the wrong terminology for the acronym IS.
Yeah,
But I think it's a typo.
I think
Yeah,
so too.
I think it might be. Okay, well, let's see where else we can go.
Unless it's like serum insulin.
Yeah, but that'd be
Like,
kind of
could it be-
redundant to say it that way, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, if they're
Oh, maybe
talking
it's
about
secretion.
insulin secretion, yes.
Oh, maybe that's it.
I don't know.
That's
Because
logical.
I think this process is driving insulin resistance, but I don't know if we're there yet. So it might be insulin. Yeah, it might be insulin secretion. It
I don't
causes
know.
your.
You would think they would just come out and say that though. Instead of putting
Well,
that-
I haven't seen this acronym before, so you'd think that the first thing they would do would be to spell it out.
yeah.
Oh. All right.
Well, let's see if we get
assume
some clarity.
Let's assume it's insulin secretion.
Yeah, and
That
then
makes
we'll
more
go
sense.
on. Even as they release free fatty acids, 7 in figure 1.12, the increasingly insulin resistant adipose cells retain their ability to grow yet fatter. But to avoid developing the metabolic syndrome, including insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and coronary heart disease, it is critical that this fat is stored in many small hyperplastic fat cells rather than in fewer but much larger hypertrophic adipose cells. But as fat cells grow, they accumulate two chemicals, 4-hydroxyminol, 4-HNE, and ceramide 1-phosphate, CIP, that prevent their division into more smaller cells, worsening the problem. So this may have nothing to do with, but I've heard like that some people, their cells just don't like some of them, like some people will make the smaller cells and it prevents them from getting insulin resistant, but then they get larger. The person gets larger. And then other people, their cells just keep getting fatter and fatter. And so they get fat too, but then it makes them type 2 diabetic.
Yeah,
So
some people actually produce more fat cells.
yeah.
What you're talking about?
So this is saying as fat cells grow, they accumulate two chemicals, the 4-HNE and ceramide 1 phosphate, CIP, that prevent their division into more smaller cells, worsening the problem. So I was just wondering.
So their fat is like their fat cells are growing bigger.
Yeah.
They're growing bigger. Yeah. Yeah.
Which I don't claim to know. I remember hearing a lot about like either like fat hypertrophy versus like producing more, but I can't remember exactly, but I don't remember exactly what was said about it, but I do remember that a lot of times making more fat is actually kind of protective, like it's your body's way of protecting you from getting diabetes. So you will see some people who are really large that maybe, I'm not saying they're not metabolically unhealthy, but they're not as, like, their numbers don't look as bad as someone who's smaller.
It is a protective feature of some people than when they get more subcutaneous fat, more adipose tissue, and it serves as a protective mechanism instead of increasing the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. It sounds like this is what it's saying here.
And I think that is insulin secretion, because if you look at what it says, I'm going back, guys, sorry. But
no worries.
Where it said, as a result, blood glucose concentrations remain elevated after eating. And then it says 5. It says number 5 in the figure, which was blood glucose. And then it says stimulating further IS. And then it says 6, and that's blood insulin. So
blood
it's
insulin, right?
Insulin.
So secretion.
So it has to be secretion.
Yeah.
We need to edit though as we go and just say, on the second edition, could you please correct these things?
No kidding. I'm writing it in here. Yeah, that would have been good for them to write it out.
Yeah, please
we're
just
not only going to read the book, but we're going to break it apart as we go.
That's right. We're going to critique.
Okay, so these larger fat cells promote the secretion of a range of inflammatory molecules, including the cytokines, 8 in figure 1.12, which act on the liver, pancreas, skeletal muscles, and brain to interfere with insulin signaling, worsening insulin resistance and producing central obesity. Okay. Insulin-resistant fat cells also reduce their secretion of the hormone adiponectin, 8 in figure 1.12, which would normally reduce circulating free fatty acid concentrations, increase tissue glucose uptake, and reduce ectopic fat deposition in the liver and skeletal muscles. Instead, reduced adiponectin concentrations worsen ectopic fat disposition. The liver worsens the inflammatory state by secreting dipeptidyl peptidase 4, DPP4, 9 in figure 1.12, which enhances inflammatory secretions of macrophages in the fat tissue, further contributing to insulin resistance. Ooh, Lord.
This is very hairy. This is hairy.
It is so involved.
So glad there's no test.
Yeah.
Right. Because it would take me a week just to learn this one page.
Except for Mike, there will be a pop quiz on the diagram.
Yes. Well, the interesting thing is that the input, and this is just kind of looking at it from a high level, the input up at the top left corner is they have 3 factors here on this process: your environment, a high carbohydrate diet, and genetic factors. So obviously we're focused on, the high carbohydrate diet, which is one of the things you can control very well. And that's kind of driving this process.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very complex and complicated, but it's driven. One of the driving factors is a high carbohydrate diet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the liver attempts to cope in figure 1.12 by exporting fat in the form of VLDL-C triglyceride, 10 in figure 1.12, the other bad cholesterol to which few refer. Excretion of the triglyceride limits the extent to which liver insulin resistance increases, since liver insulin resistance increases progressively with increasing ectopic fat content. So yeah, I mean, basically you're getting fatty liver, and as a result, your liver is not going to work right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's see. The enzyme lipoprotein lipase in blood capillaries clears the triglyceride that the liver secretes, 10 in figure 1.6, from the bloodstream, but insulin resistance reduces the activity of this enzyme. Instead, the VLDL lipoprotein transfers its triglyceride cargo to HDL-C lipoproteins. This produces HDL-C particles that are more rapidly cleared from the bloodstream. As a result, blood HDL-C concentrations fall, an undesirable result according to the model that HDL-C is the good cholesterol. All right.
Okay.
This effect explains why Revan was amongst the first to identify that a high carbohydrate diet may be detrimental for those with insulin resistance because it raises blood triglyceride concentrations while lowering blood HDL-C concentrations. Low carb, high fat.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I did notice that when I went on the carnivore diet, HDL started creeping up and triglycerides went down.
Yep.
It had the opposite effect of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and he says like low carb, high fat diets do the opposite. Already in the late 1950s, Albrink had drawn attention to the finding that high blood triglyceride concentrations were more likely to be linked to coronary heart disease than were elevated blood cholesterol concentrations, a contention that Peter Coe had also found and had linked to high carbohydrate diets.
So they knew this in the 50s. We knew they knew this a long time ago, but yet everybody was still so focused on LDL cholesterol.
Mm-hmm. Thus, this mechanism explains why a key diagnostic marker of insulin resistance severity is an increase in blood triglyceride concentration and simultaneous reduction in HDL concentration. Together with type 2 diabetes and other markers of insulin resistance, including the lipoprotein insulin resistance score, that ratio is one of the best markers of the extent to which coronary atherosclerosis develops. But it only gets worse. The more fat in the liver, the more insulin resistant the liver, and the more damaged are the LDL-C particles that result. The majority of those particles are small and dense, known as pattern B. These LDL particles are the truly bad cholesterol, as they are especially prone to oxidative damage with the production of arterial damaging oxysterols. These particles place anyone with insulin resistance at a greater risk of coronary heart disease. Let's see, and this is in 11 in figure 1.12. Carbohydrate restriction.
Atherogenic dyslipidemia is 11. So
yep,
atherogenic is the arteries, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So carbohydrate restriction, on the other hand, produces the opposite pattern with larger LDL particles. Another effect of increasing liver insulin resistance is to release the brake insulin normally exerts on the liver glucose production. As a result, the liver begins to overproduce glucose, raising blood glucose concentrations. The diagnostic feature of type 2 diabetes, and that's number 12 in figure 1.12. The hyperglycemia is toxic, especially to the pancreatic cells, number 13 in figure 1.12, and is known as glucose toxicity, 14 in figure 1.12. So, okay. Uh-huh. Oh boy, we're getting close to, yeah.
So our liver is going to respond because when it's fatty, we've developed fatty liver, we've developed insulin resistance. Our liver is going to respond by producing more glucose. It sounds like this is independent even of how much we're consuming. Am I reading that right?
Yeah. I believe.
Because it's not saying that it's at this point in the process, it's not saying that it's necessarily the carbohydrates that are making the liver produce more glucose. It's the condition of the liver itself.
Yeah, because at a certain point, the liver is just not going to work right. And so at that point, I mean, depending on how far you go, you might be at the point of no return.
Right, because it says that and I don't know that it can be reversed if you just stop, but it may take a little bit of while for the liver to heal if you heal the insulin resistance in the fatty liver. But it says here the other effect of increasing insulin resistance is to release the brake insulin normally exerts on liver glucose production. So your liver isn't paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
It has lost that brake. There's no brake to its glucose production, so it just keeps producing.
Yep. So ultimately, this hyperinsulinemia cannot be sustained. The pancreatic cells fail, 14 in figure 1.12, and the blood glucose concentrations rise, causing glucose to appear in urine and the fasting glucose concentration to exceed 6.5 millimeters per liter, I guess is what that is, or 117 milligrams per deciliter. When this happens, the diagnosis is full-blown type 2 diabetes. Pancreatic insulin resistance also removes the brake insulin exerts on glucagon secretion from the pancreatic cells, number 15 in figure 1.12. Increasing the blood glucagon concentrations further increases liver glucose production. Blood glucose concentrations rise further, stimulating yet more insulin secretion, and that's 12 in figure 1.12.
It turns into this cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Like a vicious cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Very vicious. In time, the fatty liver also becomes glucagon resistant. The ultimate effect is to increase blood amino acid concentrations that feed back to the pancreas. Number 16 in figure 1.12, the liver-pancreas axis to further increase pancreatic glucagon secretion. This stimulates further glucagon secretion, causing liver glucose production, establishing a vicious cycle. Yeah, that's what we were saying. Finally, insulin increases secretion of aldosterone, which increases sodium retention in the kidneys, increasing water retention and potentially increasing blood pressure. Insulin activates the sympathetic nervous system, which may further raise blood pressure by promoting vasoconstriction in arteriolar blood vessels. So that's number 17 in figure 1.12. Inflammatory damage to the lining cells of the blood vessels, the endothelium, compound this, causing reduced ability to secrete the vasodilator substance nitric oxide. not shown in figure 1.12. The brain may also become insulin resistant with consequences for food intake, reward, and mood. Brain insulin resistance causes hyperphagia, anxiety, and depressive-like behavior, and compromises the dopaminergic system. Yeah. Such effects can induce reduced compliance to medical treatment. Let me read that again. Such effects can induce reduced compliance to medical treatment. At the end result is metabolic syndrome, 18 in figure 1.12, that comprises type 2 diabetes, arterial hypertension, atherogenic dyslipidemia, and central obesity. In contrast to these examples, other cells retain their normal responsiveness to insulin. So I've heard Dr. Bickman talk about that, because like he would say that like insulin resistance only applies to like some of the cells, and then some of them are actually just because they are still sensitive, that they actually overact, and like that happens like with PCOS in women, because it's overacting with the increase in insulin. That ties in.
Yeah, and we learned that earlier in chapter 2, that different parts of the body can have varying degrees of insulin sensitivity or resistance at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like your insulin resistance, every cell is equally insulin resistant.
Right.
What I thought was interesting was it said such effects can induce reduced compliance to medical treatment. I assume that it means the medical treatment isn't working as well as it should. But my thought is, why doesn't this prompt the doctors to change the medical treatment? Like, from what I'm gathering here, if you would recommend, instead of throwing everybody on a hypertension medication, if you would recommend, okay, let's start with our diet. What we need to do is reduce carbohydrates. That's going to reduce insulin. That's going to make you get rid of all this excess water. That's going to bring your blood pressure down. It's like it happens so quickly. And why don't they know that? Like, I don't know. I mean, everybody that we know knows that because they've seen it in their own body. Heart rate goes down, blood pressure goes down, swelling goes down. But yet they want to say, oh, no. Hold on. Okay, so that guy scared me. Oh, there's my son. What they want to say is that we need to reduce salt, right?
Yeah.
Guys, I've got to let him in. Okay. Anyway, so I'm on my baby. Okay, but anyway, what they want to say is reduce salt, and it just seems so basic that how are we not getting this? How's modern medicine so advanced, but yet they're not getting the simple stuff?
It seems like there's so much of evidence we're seeing these people who did these scientific studies, and as they were talking about in this section, this guy even ignored his own findings. So the pressure that this Raven guy, he was obviously under pressure, right?
And I guess if it doesn't fit the narrative, you don't want to push that, right?
Right, exactly.
I'm sorry, I need to. Hello.
Yeah. I was just listening to
yes, I'm in the middle of this
with this journalist. I'm going to have to go figure out what the book that she wrote, and it sounded super interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I'll maybe put it in the comments, but she was talking about how all of the doctors used the Merck manual, for learning pharmacology, learning about the medicines. She's just published this book where she's looking at the FDA, the government regulatory agencies, and all the problems with them. But she was, she in her book, she's pointing out errors in the Merck manual, things that are outright wrong, things that were omitted. And so I'm like, okay, intrigued now. I'm going to have to
Yeah.
go figure out what book she was
And
and put
that's
it
like
comment.
the medical source to go to. Everybody gets a Merck manual, in nursing
Mhm.
school, I'm sure in school to be a physician also they hand them out.
Oh yeah,
Gotta buy this
absolutely.
really thick Merck manual, right?
And
Um,
you think, I mean, Merck is a drug company. And
Mhm.
so I never, even when I was in
that
nursing school,
I never
I
realized
thought, okay,
that.
well, they must know the drugs. So what
Oh, yeah.
better? But yeah, but they have major conflicts of interest. They
But
want
yeah,
their
our
drug.
Merck manual that we got was like about disease processes. It wasn't about drugs. So, wow, that's
But what's the
eye opening.
solution? But what's
That
the
is very
solution?
that's
Mm.
very eye opening, Lynn. That goes back to follow the money, right?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, because even if it's about disease processes, the solution is a drug, right?
Yeah, they're gonna and the way that like why would they want to suggest in their manual, oh, if you decrease the carbohydrates, you'll decrease the insulin, you'll decrease the
Yeah.
the
Then you're not going to need these
yeah,
drugs.
you're not going to need your
Right.
hypertensive medication,
Okay, I found it.
antihypertensives.
Okay, I found it. So the book is called. It's by Cheryl S. I'm going to type it in the comments here. Whoops, what did I just do? Okay, so it's SHARYL Cheryl ATTKISSON Atkinson, and the book is called Follow the Science. And then colon, how big pharma misleads, obscures, I hope I'm spelling all this right, and prevails. Okay, that's her book. It sounds like it just came out.
Mm.
Okay, I put it in the chat. So
I
sounds
love
like
I love Mike's comment. He said he should have taken the chemistry prerequisite before taking this class.
I think I should have too.
Mike, listen, I got a D in chemistry, okay, and then I didn't retake it. So this is what we're working with.
I actually taught high school chemistry for
Oh,
one year when I was in my, I was probably 25 or 26 years old. And that was a long time. That was 30 years ago. So,
well, guys, my son is finished with his class, so I have to head out. So,
yes. Awesome. Well, this is a good place to stop anyways. That was like a brain full.
Okay.
So we'll let you know when we're going to meet next. We're going to decide. And thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
It was so good to see everybody.
Yeah, nice to see you guys. We'll see you next time.
Okay.
Bye-bye, y'all.
All right.